When you're looking for volunteers for the funeral procession, you hire the part-time henchman. I am Jeremy.
I am sad. I am Joanna sad.
And I'm Jesse.
I'm trying to figure out the scale of Joanna's sad. There is a lot to talk about this week, and unfortunately a large amount of it is not positive. Breaking news happened this morning that we found out that a major comic creator passed away. And that was in between everything else going on. For those that don't know, I live in Southern California, and for the past 5 days, it has been on fire. And that's not a metaphor. It has just been on fire. I have not been able to stop watching televised news for the past 72 hours.
Ugh.
Yeah. Let me lay it out for you. The Woolsey fire was not the biggest fire that started on Thursday, but by Friday it was the thing that took up everyone's attention. By Friday it had moved towards the ocean and it basically charred about 20 to 22 square miles.
Ooh.
Yeah. And when they set down the evacuation zone for it, I was a little freaked because my workplace is in the middle of it. But as I was studying the map, I realized the evacuation zone stops 1 block from my house.
Oh, wow.
1 block.
Lead to disaster.
Yeah, all that's separating me from a bunch of cops telling me get out is a high school.
The one time you're grateful for that school zone.
That's debatable still. I still have to drive around these people during school days. It's not fun for me. So, yeah, I've just been obsessively watching news, trying to distract myself with like cell phone games because I'm terrified to turn on a console. That means I can't watch the news.
Mm.
So it has been a very frustrating day, or weekend, actually. I have not done anything I intended to. As a matter of fact, I arranged a cosplay event on Sunday, and it was in my neighborhood. And early morning Sunday, it's like I expected the wind to blow away the smoke, but I had no idea flare-ups would happen. So early that morning, I canceled it, to which a couple of people involved just said, "Aw, but I was looking forward to this." And by 9 a.m., I'm watching the news. There is another flare-up in my neighborhood. In other words, like embers blew into some brush and started a new small fire, right next to houses. And as I'm staring at it, I take a picture of my TV and post it into the Facebook group for this cosplay event. And I say, okay, I don't feel seal anymore. You see that grove of trees in the upper left-hand corner? That's the park we were going to.
Oh no. The ones that are on fire?
Not on fire, but I mean, it is like full-on, very visible from this picture. So all of a sudden everyone's like, okay, we'll see you next week. Good call!
What are you doing apocalyptic scene?
Oh, God, man. It has been awful out here. It has just been awful, and I finally unclenched this morning because they reopened the freeway. I can get to my office. It still exists. It still has power. Nothing is burned, although everything smells like an ashtray. And I'm just past my morning break when all of a sudden I get news that there's 2 new flare-ups, like 5 miles north of us and 5 miles west of us. The hearing rep I work for panics because the one to the west of us is very near his house, so he leaves. And 20 minutes later, one of the other attorneys comes walking through and they just said, that's it, there's too much smoke and there's too much happening nearby. Everybody's out. Get out. Huh. And it's like, I know that sounds rude, but I understood her meaning. We're closing the office. Get out. I don't care what you're doing. Don't log out. Don't put away papers. Just get out. So I picked up my bag and my hoodie and I just walk out the door. After making sure that the HR rep knew about that, because I'm not going to be counted as abandoning my job. Anyway.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Cover the bases.
Yeah. So, how are you?
Pre-holiday retail is brutal.
Oh, yeah.
I've done that.
Yeah, I haven't been in the retail scene for a while. I was at a nice, cushy office job, but situation dictated I have a job, so, money for Christmas and stuff. Mm-hmm. It's been brutal. People are pretty nice, though, for a big box retail store.
That's good.
Customers have been really, really pleasant, and that's been nice. Just physical labor is just at the end of the day. And I has a sad still. Like, today was just so gray and cold and dreary outside, and it perfectly reflected what I was feeling about Stanley, and I'm just like...
Yeah.
Sigh.
Yeah, it just occurred to me after I finished that whole spiel listening to you, we should probably mention that it was Stan Lee who passed away. It's not like we can keep a secret. The show comes out days after we record it anyway, so.
Right.
And, that was kind of the nail in my day, honestly, because I got the news while I was sitting at my computer just after my break, and I go to talk to the one lady in my office who I know is aware of comic books and creators. And I walk up to her, and she sees my face, and she just said, "Oh, so you heard?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Isn't it awful?" "Yeah, it is." "I can't believe there's new fires." "What, there's new fires again?" And she says, "What did you come to talk about?" "Stan Lee died." And she makes this thrashing motion at her desk like she's trying to punch something desperately. So,
Yeah.
that's the kind of day it's been. Jesse, what about you? What's up with you, dude?
Well, I've worked every day this week at the stupid gas station.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't dropped on me the last minute like it usually is. It
Yeah.
was just a kind of agreed upon thing back in August.
Yeah, it just occurred to me, though, the irony of what I'm suffering through when it comes to fire, yet you work around combustible things and nothing's on fire. That's not fair. I can hear the wheels clicking. I'm not saying drop a lighter at the tanks or anything.
Quick spot of the cold with a dry throat for over the weekend.
Okay.
And what made it worse is my first experience with acid reflux.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, it crawled all the way up into my nose. That was not a fun experience.
Yeah, that's one of those times where a nasal wash is actually preferable.
Mm.
The subject of this week is Rat Queens Volume 2. I think it's called The Tentacles of Nagroth. We'll get to that after the news of the week, and we will start with Marvel comic news. We'll talk about all the properties that Disney owns and what they're doing now and in the near future in the comic books. And Captain Marvel is getting a new series. She's going to get a new #1 for the next volume of her story after The Life of Captain Marvel, where they have retconned her history. I can't remember who is doing it. But, Kelly Thompson's writing the book. She's one of the people that's been helping out with the revival of the X-Men lately. And supposedly it's going to include several things bringing Captain Marvel back to Earth. She's going to have more of a presence in Boston. They're going to explore her newfound Kree heritage. And rumor has it she's going to have a new romantic love interest in it.
Cool.
Yeah, there will also be face-to-face meetings with a number of Marvel heroes like Spider-Woman, who's one of her best friends, Iron Man, who is arguably her equal in the Marvel Universe, and War Machine, who used to be her boyfriend before he died.
Wait, they're bringing War Machine back?
Oh, he's
Or-
already back.
Oh, when did that happen?
Towards the end of Invincible Iron Man, before the new Tony Stark Iron Man series.
Huh.
It's there. I read it.
Hmm.
But at least they're bringing him back. Or brought him back. Jeez.
True.
As a matter of fact, there is another problem in the Marvel Universe that Captain Marvel's been dealing with, and now she has a strike team to deal with this particular problem. Have either of you been reading The Immortal Hulk?
No.
No, I've gotten snippets here and there on the internet.
Okay. I have read The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina the Witch. I didn't find that scary. The Immortal
No.
Hulk actually scares me.
In what way?
Okay, issue number 8 came out this past week. And the Avengers defeated the Hulk in issue 7 with a laser, a UV laser that basically desiccated him down to a mummified corpse. And they had to annihilate a Midwest town after they evacuated it to get it done. That's how much power required.
Yeah.
So they handed the Hulk over to a government general who demanded that the Avengers bring down the Hulk. The problem is the general disappeared after he took the body. And he apparently took the body to an unknown black site, where to deal with the problem and to make sure that the Hulk didn't just kind of regenerate and get mad with him, they sectioned the Hulk.
Whoa.
They took his hands, put them in jars. Took his feet, put them in jars. Separated his legs down to the muscles, put those in separate jars. His head in a jar. His heart in a jar. Sections of his chest in other jars. He was inhabiting a wall, basically. And you could see from the image that the Hulk had regenerated well enough where he was back to being green and bulky, muscled, but he couldn't put himself back together, and he was staring at the scientist who was laughing at him.
Whoa.
Fast forward to issue number 8, okay? The Hulk is still floating in these jars, and as the scientist is talking about trying to figure out how he works, the Hulk is making faces like he's trying to talk, but, no lungs. And the scientist is toying with his heart. In other words, he took it into another room, had it cut in half, and brought back to him. And apparently, once the cart was being pushed down the hall, when it was close enough to the rest of the Hulk, the two halves started to beat again.
Oh, God.
And then as the scientists picked them up and put them together, they mended themselves, which is really just next level freaky, right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
seriously.
Yeah, they're still trying to figure out what to do. Meanwhile, Carol Danvers has formed a strike team to find out what happened to the Hulk because no one's answering her questions as to what happened to the body. They're bringing up Walter Langowski, who used to be Sasquatch from Alpha Flight.
Mm-hmm.
And because his strike team, which right now includes an investigative reporter and just whatever sensors they have on the Alpha Flight station, they're calling it Gamma Flight, which is a two-part deal because Gamma Flight obviously is a reference to the Hulk and the energy he produces.
Uh-huh.
But Gamma Flight also used to be the name of the training corps for the Alpha Flight team in Canada.
Huh.
But to answer your question about how weird all this got and why the Hulk scares me, eventually this scientist was told to move all of his stuff, so he was making arrangements with his assistants who all left the room. Then he looks at the jar, and the Hulk is smiling at him while his head is floating upside down.
Yeah, no thank you.
And then he
I'm
wants
just nope right out of there.
Yeah, and the scientist wants to know why the Hulk is laughing. He can't do anything. He's in jars. He's in pieces. And then it occurs to him that between the Hulk and Banner, the Hulk is not the scientist. He wouldn't know how to figure out what he could do. But if the Hulk waited to let a bunch of scientists dissect him and then start experimenting, he might know the same things they know.
Mm.
And when he comes to that realization is when the Hulk's left hand in a separate jar puts its fingers together and snaps.
Oh, shoot.
And the
Wait.
force of that snap was enough to shatter every jar along the wall.
Oh.
How did he...
Apparently, they tested him. He's not psionic, so whatever is making his body move while it's in different pieces is not telepathy or telekinesis. It can't be hyper regeneration because his glands, his brain has been destroyed before. Yet somehow it keeps coming back together. He is something else entirely.
And he's not going to be happy once he's back together. I'm just saying.
It was worse than you think because he finished this with 0 smashing. Not a bit. And this is a smarter Hulk. This one talks in full sentences, but he's made it very clear. He's not up for anybody's crap right now. And what happened was the contents of the jar spilled all over the floor and then started to congeal back together, obviously.
Mm.
Except they congealed around the main scientist who'd been taunting him all this time.
Oh.
Before this guy could reach out and hit the alarm, the Hulk's body was in enough of one piece that all that was left was a pair of eyes staring out of his chest and one arm reaching for the wall that was slowly pulled back into the Hulk's body and gone.
Eesh.
Wow.
That's nightmare fuel for a month.
Yeah.
Maybe 2.
You know, and the Hulk's transformations work differently. It's not about anger at this point. It's the nighttime is the Hulk's time, the daytime is Banner's time. So there really is no downtime for the two together. There's just one active depending on what time of day it is. Anyway, the Hulk punched his way back up to the surface before daytime, and then he reverted back to Banner, but it wasn't the usual shrinking thing. It was like this almost melting type of transformation to which Banner is chilled to the bone because he knows that for the first time ever, the Hulk has purposefully caused someone's death, but he doesn't know how. And that told me something else, that when something happens to the Hulk, Banner may feel it, but he is not subject to it. Otherwise, when Banner transformed, either he would be incredibly full, or there should have been 2 people standing there.
Mm-hmm.
So I read this comic, and I'm just chilled, because you now have an intelligent monster that apparently has very little by the way of morals or ethics.
Yeah, that is more terrifying than the all-out smashing monster that doesn't have any breaks.
Mm-hmm. And he may not be the brightest fish, but he knows it, and he's clever enough to wait.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought him grinning ear to ear at a bunch of thugs in the first issue was chilly enough.
Yeah, this one freaks me the hell out, man. You would think all the Satanist stuff in Sabrina, the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, would push me over the edge. No, I found that kind of trite. This thing is scaring the hell out of me.
Yeah, at least no one's gonna sue this comic.
Oh, low blow, dude. Low blow. The Marvel Knights 20th Anniversary #1 by Donny Cates and Tavel Foreman also came out this past week. We talked about that a couple months ago, where we saw the cover, and Matt Murdock, for some reason, doesn't remember he's Daredevil. And he seemed to be surrounded by a bunch of other Marvel heroes in plainclothes for some reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, though, there's a reason for that cover. as a result of the issue, we found out that it's not just Daredevil or Matt Murdock doesn't remember he's Daredevil. The heroes of the Marvel Universe don't remember their heroes.
How?
That's where it gets weird. Apparently, Doctor Doom and the Kingpin have been playing around with some kind of machine. It's not very clear what it does, but it apparently, en masse, made a lot of people forget superheroes or anything about them, with a couple of notable exceptions, of course, being Doom, the Kingpin, and Bullseye.
This device, my knee-jerk thought is Cosmic Cube?
I don't know. When Doom was talking to the Kingpin, he used the line, "There is a dragon wrapped around the machine, preventing him from using it." And considering this is Doom, I don't know if that's figurative or literal.
Probably literal coming from him.
You'd think so. And they didn't really denote what the device is, so I don't know if this is a technical device, a mystic device, or it's Doom's usual melding of the two. But whatever happened, they definitely did something that's a bit beyond them, and it's broken now.
Oops.
Oh boy.
So I guess there's a question of whether or not they can fix it, and then do they want to, even? Because apparently Bullseye was following two guys named Frank Castle and Bruce Banner who were confronting Daredevil before they reported to somebody else. Oh, they were reporting to Wilson Fisk. He's somehow engaged them as footmen. But they don't remember. Yeah, but they don't remember being the Hulk or the Punisher, obviously. You know, Foggy Nelson is sharing a law firm with Jennifer Walters, who remembers nothing about the She-Hulk. Things like this.
Wow.
So I feel like I should back up and read it.
Yeah.
Might want to look into it.
Yeah. Last up, when it comes to Marvel comic news, a new teaser has been revealed for a new Infinity Watch. We're in the middle of the story Infinity Wars, which revolves around the stones, as everybody knows. But the Infinity Watch is a team that's appeared in Marvel Universe. It's usually a cobbled-together group of individuals, each of whom holds an Infinity Stone, with the idea of safeguarding them so nobody can reform the Infinity Gauntlet. Mm-hmm. And for more casual people who don't know, usually when they gather the 6 stones, they put them into a gauntlet because it's the easiest way to keep them all under grips and control. There's been variations on it, but the gauntlet's probably the most infamous cosmic weapon in Marvel's history at this point. Here's the thing, though. The cover to this Infinity Watch #1, it has the name of a particular character on it, and it's going to be pretty easy for you to understand, because it's a picture of the fully formed Infinity Gauntlet with 3 claws coming through it.
The hell, really?
Yeah, apparently Logan, the Wolverine, is a member of this new Infinity Watch.
Really?
Yeah, it's just the teaser, so I don't have a whole lot of details as to what we're looking for or even what we're looking at, but there's no mistaking the combination of the Infinity Gauntlet and Wolverine's adamantium claws. So, just so you know what I'm talking about, I'm going to go ahead and link the image to you in Skype. I mean, there's no mistaking the Infinity Gauntlet combined with Wolverine's adamantium claws there.
Oh, that's cool.
It's a very nice image, but it still is a very WTF image.
Mm-hmm.
The new series, Wolverine Infinity Watch, is going to be done by Jerry Dugan and Andy McDonald. And just this image, I'm not a fan of the Infinity Gauntlet as a weapon. I think it's too overpowered. Definitely not a fan of Wolverine. But these two combined, okay. You have my curiosity.
Right.
You know, I've already seen Wolverine with a Space Stone. A teleporting berserker is scary enough. So, yeah, I'd like to see how this shakes out. We'll move on to DC comic news. These are the stories about the other major companies in comics and what they're up to now and in the near future. The co-creator of Harley Quinn, Paul Dini, has teased an interesting team-up in DC. What it means, I'm not entirely sure, especially since I don't know how this fits into continuity right now. The reason why I say that is because it actually has something to do with what we discussed last week and how this should not entirely be possible. I'm sending you a link to the image right now in Facebook, and if you open it up, you can see 4 images there. A bunch of leaves, a small bird, a doll, and a rabbit sticking its tongue out. I assume it's licking its nose. That, or it's just an asshole rabbit. I don't know. But fans online correctly guess that these images are evocative of Poison Ivy, the Magpie, Baby Doll, and the March Hare. all
Mhm.
people within Batman's realm of influence. And once those were decoded, Dini himself admitted, quote, Poison Ivy, Magpie, Baby Doll, and March Hare, now that's a team-up, unquote.
I'm unfamiliar with the March Hare. I know everyone. Oh, actually, I don't even know Magpie.
I'm not altogether familiar with them myself. I've heard the names, but usually in passing or like in the
Yeah.
background of other things.
Yeah.
But when somebody asked if Dini was working on such a team up, he said, quote, yes, and soon, unquote.
Neat.
It is neat, but we also just recently found out that Poison Ivy was one of the fatalities in Heroes in Crisis, so I don't know where in continuity this whole thing would be, or if it would be an Elseworlds type item.
Hmm.
I was wondering that too.
I'm not sure. I'm guessing that the March Hare probably has something to do with the influence of the Mad Hatter.
Hmm.
Definitely in some relation to it, I guess.
Yeah, I wouldn't know absolutely for sure. I mean, I'm like a lot of people. I'm really well comfortable with certain members of Batman's Rogues Gallery, but others I'm very much unaware of. I know more about Kite Man than I know about the March Hare.
I mean, outside of Poison Ivy, the only one I know more about is actually Baby Doll, but that's thanks to the animated series.
Yeah. Well, Brian Michael Bendis, he used to be a big creator in Marvel. He helped create the New Avengers. He's currently working for DC, and he's just hinted that a long-standing Green Lantern may be appearing in his Superman books soon. Uh, the Eisner Award winner said that he updated his spell check to include the words Aricia Rab.
Um, I have no idea.
Aricia Rab was introduced as a young addition to the Corps back in, I want to say, the mid-'80s. She's an almost elfin-looking girl with yellowish-orange skin and blonde
Okay,
hair.
that was the character that popped into my mind.
Yeah. She originally died back in 1996 as Guy Gardner Warrior number 43 by Major Force, but instead she was retconned to just be in a long-standing coma in 2006 as Green Lantern number 13. Since then, the character's been a big part of the Green Lantern Corps, although most of the people that she was brought back with have passed away. And as to what she could be doing in the Superman books, I don't know, but this is Bendis we're talking about. He has a habit of taking characters and reinventing them for a modern world. So, I don't know. I'm not sure how to feel about that because it feels like the Green Lantern in general needs a reinvention. I read Grant Morrison's new The Green Lantern #1,
Hmm.
and I don't know how, but the comic book came across as pretentious. It's hard for a comic book to be pretentious, in my opinion. But the best description I have for what he did with Hal Jordan is he made Jordan into an adult version of Scott Pilgrim.
What?
He is
Huh.
this slacker who appears to be bouncing from job to job because the Green Lantern Corps won't have him at the time the book picks up. He has the ring, but it's extremely low on charge. He's taking odd jobs, but not doing well at them. He's hanging out with a woman he's sexually involved with, but it's hard to call it love. He is the adult Scott Pilgrim.
That is pretentious. Pass.
Okay, I'm glad somebody else at least saw what I saw, but I couldn't find a way to like it because at the same time it was an oversized first issue. I found out a lot about Hal Jordan's attitude in the book and what he's up to, but I didn't really dig the story or lack thereof. I really don't know what they were shooting for in the book.
Hmm.
As a matter of fact, in that book, it was revealed that the Watchmen's or Dr. Manhattan's meddling in the DC universe may be much deeper than intended. In the Green Lantern #1, one of the Guardians of the Universe revealed to Hal Jordan that somebody has been messing with the Book of Oa. The Book of Oa has long-standing prophecies that usually come true in the DC universe, although they're like
Mhm.
Nostradamus. They're kind of hard to understand until you're in the moment, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
When Jordan's standing in front of the book, there's this huge black miasmic void sitting over it. And on top of that void is a single blue dot with a blue ring and a one dot in that ring, which is the atomic symbol of hydrogen, which is the one that Dr. Manhattan burned into his own forehead in the Watchmen series.
Huh.
So they still don't have a name as to whatever happened, but obviously if you've been reading comic books long enough, you know who's been messing around with the order of the universe. The particular Guardian, who maybe Ganthet, revealed to Jordan that because of the meddling, the Book of Oa is just untrustworthy at this point. So they really don't know how the universe is going to go forward right now. They don't have any foresight into it.
Hmm.
I know, it feels like we're bouncing around a little bit. DC has also resurrected one of the villains from the Crisis. According to the unexpected number 6, Mandrak the Dark Monitor is back. Now, it has some symbology in here that I don't quite know, and it would take me a little bit to explain, and the only reason I don't do that is because if I don't understand it, how can I explain it to you? It was broken down on CBR.com, though, that the images are very evocative of when Mandrak died in the Final Crisis. The problem I have, though, is that, one, I didn't read the Final Crisis. I tried, but to me it felt a lot like Dark Knight's Metal. You're writing this for somebody that's not me. And two, I really have no knowledge as to what Mandrak the Dark Monitor is. I don't know what else to say. It sounds imposing in certain ways, but I don't have any references here. I can't tell you how good or bad this is. I also got kind of worried when the phrase in the CBR story about all this, about the successors to the monitors, are the Tempest Fugonauts.
Wow, just in the names.
That did feel like a bit of a stretch to me. Some of the characters from the Dark Multiverse have been spread into the DC proper, though. Well, we discussed that Sideways, one of the newer heroes from DC since Dark Knight's Metal, has found out his teleportation powers take him across the multiverse, and he's encountered versions of characters that were basically single what-ifs back in the 60s that have been taken through to, I guess you could say, logical conclusions. There's a negative Superman, not an evil one, just like a near phantasmic one. Big brain Lois Lane, who went from just having a huge brain case to being basically a large brain with a pair of legs and spider-like arms to walk herself along. A couple different versions of Jimmy Olsen, including one that's a porcupine and one that's a werewolf. Lori Lamaris, who was a mermaid that Superman fell in love with back in the 60s. And then there's Comet, which was a horse character that was seen in several Supergirls series that has developed a new group of powers. Now that these characters have evolved somewhat, they've been dropped off in the DC proper, and they're trying to figure out how to exist in a world where Superman, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, and everything else is already there, and have very involved lives without any of them. That almost feels like a better story than Sideways, really.
This feels like a Hanna-Barbera cartoon.
That's a good description. It's a little freaky. Especially when Comet was that weird psionic shape-changing horse that, like, mentally seduced Supergirl. I really don't know how to feel about that one.
Yeah, awkward.
Yeah, we've talked about that one on and off in, like, some weird top 20 lists of, like, the weirdest Superman and Supergirl stories. And somehow Comet keeps making the top 10, along with the time that alien worms made love in front of Superman and Batman and made them cry.
Oh, wow, yeah, I remember that one.
The imagery is so horrible.
I've yet to see it.
I want to share it, but I'm not that cruel.
Please don't. I can live a long, happy life without that.
Let's show Casey.
Yeah. That's his punishment for missing tonight. Do it. Do it.
Last up in DC comic news, Batman has a new ward.
Another one.
Yeah, although he's less likely to kill this one, I guess. In the Justice League, they're going through this event, I can't remember what it's called, the one where there's mystic waters that are transforming people into underwater monsters, basically. The world is flooding. God, I do not remember what the story is called. Drowned Earth, that's it. Drowned Earth. In prior stories in the Justice League, Batman has been relegated to a chair that gives him some mobility, but it's also healing his body in this weird bulky armor, right? Kind of a full-body cast.
Mm-hmm.
But the Justice League is entirely out of the Hall of Justice, which is submerged right now. It's airtight, but nobody can get in and out, and the teleports have been shut off because, like I said, any people that come in contact with this water are being transformed into monsters, so they can't afford to let the water into the hall, nor can they afford to let people just kind of traipse in and out of it. So, Batman is trying to raise the League, and he's trying to ask his assistant to use their telepathic powers to sense anyone, which it cannot. Batman's new ward is Jarro.
Who?
Remember we discussed that Starro the Conqueror, or at least a small piece of him, survived and was sitting in a jar on Batman's shelves right now in the Justice League?
Uh-huh.
Are you serious?
Yeah, for some reason he called this thing Jarro, which I guess was supposed to be a joke, but still comes off as a little bit trite to me. Anyway, when he asked if Jarro could raise anyone, he called it by name, Jarro, And its response was, "I'm getting nothing, Dad. No one." It's calling him
That's
Dad.
awkward. That's really kind of awkward.
Yeah, I mean, there's a small part of me that wants to laugh at it, but I'm thinking you have an alien starfish with extreme telepathic ability calling you Dad. Wait, Batman's a father. This thing is screwed.
Yeah, really.
You know, Damien has only turned out as well as he has, I think, because he spent most of his life away from his dad. His formative years in training were under somebody who is a genocidal madman, but is probably more sane than Bruce Wayne.
That's not saying much, though.
I didn't say it was. So I just kind of looked at that and went, wow, there is no way this turns out well.
So I found that image you're talking about. I'm looking at this star Ajaro. He is quite literally a baby form of Starro. So
Yeah.
I think he's just the level of maturity in this one is just dropped drastically.
You can just never put that jar in front of a mirror, because as soon as it looks at itself and realizes that doesn't look like Dad, you're going to have so many other conversations.
So it's imprinted on him.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's still very weird.
Honestly, Batman's probably not the worst that he could have imprinted on.
I would
but
actually-
It's up there.
I
It's up
actually
there.
feel like the story should be Jarro meeting Damien. You know, Damien looks down and says, "What's this?" And this thing looks up and says, "Dad, what's that?"
Dude, that would be an interesting story to write. It would.
We will move on to general comic and convention news. This is where we talk about comic books happening all over the world, as well as comic books that are not Marvel or DC related. And it bears repeating that as of this morning, on November 12th, Stan Lee passed away. He was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Hospital early this morning. They have not listed what a cause of death was, but he died at the hospital. And considering all the fires, damage, and whatever's in the air around here, as well as Stan's own well-known health issues, it could have been a number of things that happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very strange day, because I had to evacuate my work because of fire. Today is my wedding anniversary, my 13th, and Stan Lee died. I have so many mixed emotions about today, it's not even funny.
Wow.
Yeah. Stan Lee was 95 when he passed. He is survived by his daughter, J.C. Lee. Stan lost his own wife, I believe, last year. And she was a significant force in his life. This is a man who helped create the Avengers, Spider-Man, the Black Panther, and the X-Men. And I do know that he's one of the reasons they're famous. I don't think he's the central reason why they're famous. And don't lynch me, because I think that he had a lot of good intentions when he created them. I just don't think that these characters really caught on until somebody else tried to push them in a bit of a different direction, you know? The X-Men were not a successful property until Dave Cockrum and Len Wein took their own shot at it and tried something new. You know what I mean? But Lee had a big career. He had also had repeated hospitalizations, surgery in 2012, and what he called failing eyesight. He said in 2016, quote, "My eyesight has gotten terrible and I can't read comic books anymore. The print is too small. Not only a comic book, but I can't read the newspaper or a novel or anything. I miss reading 100%. It's my biggest miss in the world," unquote.
Damn.
This man was born in 1922.
Wow.
He started working in comics back in 1939 at Timely Comics, the predecessor to Marvel. It was owned by his cousin's husband, Martin Goodwin. And he went from being basically an assistant filling inkwells and erasing pencil markings to writing backup features and then full-blown stories. When Joe Simon and Jack Kirby left Timely in 1941, Lee was named the interim editor of Timely Comics. Then when DC met success with the new age of superheroes in the 50s and 60s, what they called the Silver Age of comics, Lee responded with the Fantastic Four, which he co-created with Jack Kirby, because he recognized at the time that DC had a super team, and Timely/Marvel did not. He helped create some of the most well-known properties Marvel's ever had: Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk, the X-Men, the Avengers, Thor, Iron Man, the Black Panther, Daredevil. And he helped co-create them with real industry heavyweights like Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, Gene Colan, and Don Heck. So that is a lot.
That's a legacy.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, Stan Lee was talking about the future of Marvel way back in 1984. Thanks to Entertainment Tonight, there was an interview that resurfaced. And he said back in 1984, quote, "If you think about it, what are comic books? They're like motion pictures without the motion and without the sound, but they're stories told visually," unquote. Talk about predicting his own future. And he said at the time, quote, "I don't know about Marvel being an empire, but it is a growing company. It's nice to be working on things the public seems to enjoy and to like and to want more of. I started with Marvel Comics when I was about 16 and a half. It was known as Timely Comics in those days. One day my publisher came to me, I was the editor at the time, and he said, 'You know, Stan, one of our competitors has a superhero team which is selling very well. Why don't we do a superhero team?' So we came up with the Fantastic Four. The whole formula, if there was one, I think, was to say, let's assume somebody could really walk on walls like Spider-Man or turn green and become a monster like the Hulk. That's a given, we'll accept that. But accepting that, what would that person be like in the real world if he really existed? Wouldn't he still have to worry about making a living, or people distrusting him, or having acne and dandruff, or his girlfriend jilting him? What are the real problems people would have?" Unquote.
Yeah.
He made them people, not heroes.
Yeah, he was
Right.
forward-thinking, and he made sure that these characters had fully fleshed out lives.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I found most accessible about Spider-Man, because that was one of my first introductions to comics at all.
Mm-hmm.
My dad actually introduced me to Spider-Man, and I've seen the 60s animated. 60s or 70s, I'm not sure. One of
70s.
those
It was the
days.
70s. The old Spider-Man. Yeah.
Yeah. With the Technicolor, watercolor, psychedelic backgrounds.
Yeah.
Watch those, watch the 90s cartoons, read the comics, but he had real struggles. You know, he had to pay rent. He had to deal with this boss that he hated. He had girl problems. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't like Superman, and that was one of the things that drew me into Spider-Man. You know,
Yeah.
he wasn't perfect, and there's imperfections.
I always call that the Peter Parker syndrome. One thing goes your way, the other two go south.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things have been pouring in from social media in remembrance of Stan Lee. It would take forever to go through them, but I'd like to read a couple, actually 3 posts by Kevin Smith, the director. He met Stan personally on the set of Mallrats way back in the 90s, and they actually formed a friendship, which has got to be every comic book fan's dream. You make a movie, you get Stan Lee to be in your movie, and then the two of you get a friendship. That is like the trifecta of life goals for anybody that reads paper. But he put a selfie of himself and Stan in his later years and after Smith started to lose weight. And it said underneath, quote, "Farewell, my friend. You're not only responsible for the boy I was, but also the man I am today. I will miss you all my days," unquote.
Aw.
He followed that up with a different image of Stan Lee sitting on a throne flanked by Jay and Silent Bob lions and draped with furs, and himself and Jason Mewes on either side. That one said, quote, "This is how I'll always see you, as our benevolent leader and king, smiling down from your eternal throne on the generations of imaginations you fed and inspired. You were the first creator whose voice I knew before I ever actually heard it. You dreamed up some of my favorite modern myths and created characters that instilled in me a moral barometer, teaching me right from wrong and showing me it's always better to be a hero instead of a villain," unquote. Not only are those beautiful words, I'm just kind of glad to know that his moral compass was not set by Batman. That's very compromising.
That's good.
He went a little bit further. He posted in another place, and I'm not quite sure where this came from, quote, "Your characters represented us. Yes, they had extraordinary, unbelievable abilities, but they were also reflections of a world we knew, where Spider-Man is really just a boy who wants to help. You showed me how to interact with the audience whenever you stepped out onto Stan's soapbox to reach out to the readers. You showed me how to advocate for my field beyond the actual art itself whenever you tub-thumped for comic books outside the medium. When you did Mallrats with us, you not only made a lifelong fan's dream come true, but you also lent me comic book credibility that I still get to spend today. And whether it was for comic book men or yoga hosers, whenever I asked to borrow your heat again, you were always there for me with a smile. Outside of my parents, you were the one adult who gave me the most useful life skills I still use today. You had great power, and you always used it responsibly, fostering billions of dreamers who all knew your name, a name written in the stars for all time. You were not just a literary titan of comic books, you are a modern-day Mark Twain. I will miss you all my days, my friend and hero. Excelsior forevermore. Unquote.
That's beautiful.
You know what? I don't think I could do better. I really don't. So, instead of sitting here and bumming everybody out, we will just say he will be remembered for all time for creating gods. A man created gods in his lifetime. It was also a very rough weekend because Jesse was not around because he was working and decided not to do it, but I assisted with a badge buying group for San Diego Comic-Con.
Oh, how did that go?
I am proud to say out of 45 people that took part, they may not have all got what they wanted, but they all walked away with something.
Okay.
And, you know, we got a good number of preview nights for the group, which you got to be proud of. That's like the hardest thing to get. But also, later that day, we found out that the president of CCI, John Rogers, died of brain cancer the same day.
What?
Yeah, I saw that.
November 11th. Actually, he died, Saturday, November 10th, sorry. But yeah, the president of Comic-Con died the same day that open badge sales occurred. He died of glioblastoma, which is an aggressive brain cancer. They made the announcement on Comic-Con International's website the same day. That was a really weird day to just say, yes, we got badges. What the hell happened? You know, I don't know what's going on this weekend, but it's not a good day for comic book people. So I don't know what else to say. I feel very sorry for his family.
Yeah.
There is one creator I do not feel sorry for because he is now indebted to a number of people in the past week, and that is Charles Soule. The writer from Daredevil, the guy who's currently writing The Death of Daredevil, and he's written She-Hulk in the past. He is now indebted to thousands of comic book fans.
Really?
Yes. His hand literally wrote a check his ass cannot cash. Let me explain. On Twitter, this past Tuesday, voting day in America, right, during the midterms, he posted this on Twitter, and this is his fault. Quote, "Hello, I write comics, stories for Star Wars, Daredevil, the X-Men, etc. It's time to use this power for good. If you vote this Tuesday, I'll write you in however you want. Then, want to be Wolverine's best bud? Done. A Jedi? Darth Vader. The next Captain America? Done. Just vote." Unquote. His mistake was putting this on Twitter.
Oh boy.
Because he was deluged with different people who not only told them that he voted, but had like photographic images of them coming out with their stickers or dropping their mail-in ballots in the mailbox. After making his initial announcement, Soule eventually had to post a follow-up, and it said, quote, "So this took off. I'll be extremely busy for the next few years trying to figure out how to get all these cameos in, but that is Wednesday Charles' problem. For now, just vote." Unquote.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who are going to find themselves in comic book cameos in little places all over. But I wouldn't know where to quantify it, because I read that on Tuesday morning and I thought, you know what, maybe I should? Nah, it's more important that I vote. Then I saw by later that afternoon, he basically said, oh crap, this went way too far.
Yeah, you don't realize it's not actually it's an unwritten kind of thing, but if you post something on social media, it becomes almost a binding contract.
It does, and unfortunately, it's usually seen by a number of people you wish had never seen it. Last up in general comic news, Boom Studios is marching forward with their new Buffy the Vampire Slayer comic book series. It's something that is, depending on who you ask on this show, it's either a great thing or a horrible thing. It is a retelling of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV show. They're modernizing it, taking it out of the 90s and putting it in the modern decade. I'm kind of curious to know what stories are going to come out of this. But we may already have a clue as to some of the things that are coming out about this. I'm trying to remember who's doing the series. Oh my god, I do not remember who the creators are. Buffy the Vampire Slayer number 2 is scheduled to come out February 13th, 2019. And I know that sounds like it's far away, but in terms of comic books, it's not that far. The reason why I bring it up, and it's something that Joanna especially is probably going to enjoy, is that the cover apparently reveals one of the big villains for this new series early on. Take a
Ooh,
look
which
at
one?
Oh, take a look at this. It's a picture of Buffy in pink, and standing right behind her is the legendary Drusilla.
Oh, Drusilla was a good slash psycho
Yeah, she was a
villain.
young woman whose mind was broken in like the 1600s in England. That's when she was turned to a vampire, and unfortunately it magnified her mental difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
So she's definitely evil, but she's always just really ethereal and kind of hard to understand. She speaks in metaphors a lot of the time,
Mm-hmm.
and in a lot of winding roads. But if she's there, it's very likely that means that some version of Spike is going to be there as well, I would imagine.
Yay!
Although,
I'm more of an Angel girl, but I know
Yeah.
plenty of Spike fans that are going to be excited.
well, actually, I was going to say there's no guarantee that Spike's going to be in it. It could be they're trying to establish Drusilla as a next level villain in this series.
That could be cool too.
Yeah.
I'd be down for that.
And actually, under the same for the same comic, there's a variant cover by Kevin Wada, who used to do covers for She-Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
It may also detail another character that has a big part in this particular issue. If you take a look, it is a watercolor version of Willow.
Ooh.
And she's not in her usual dress-down look. She's in a denim jacket, bedazzled with different pins. Almost look like the kind of pins you get from comic book conventions, and a red backpack, and she's, I don't want to say primping, she's just checking in the mirror, it looks like, before she heads out for the day. It's a good look.
Yeah. Modern, but definitely Willow.
Mm-hmm. I give Boom credit, man. It is ballsy to take a series and say, okay, we're going to try to start again.
Especially one with as big of a following as Buffy.
Oh, yeah, I went to WhedonCon a couple years ago, and there was one panel that was dedicated to the musical episode of Buffy, where half the crowd was singing along, and I was just sitting here going, dude, I'm way out of my element here.
I love that episode so much.
That was about the time I checked out of the series, and I'm not going to sit here and say it was bad, it just stopped working for me. So I moved on. I was more of an Angel person.
Yeah, I enjoyed Angel, both the character and the show, because they kind of got more into the serious, like, hey, this is my purpose. It was less close-ended than Buffy was, because after a while, it's like, okay, what's the big bad of the week? Okay, this is how we defeat it. And moving on, what kind of drama is happening in the Scooby Crew, you know?
You know, it may have just reflected my own level of growing maturity at the time, because it did feel like Angel was dealing with more far-reaching problems than Buffy. Buffy's stuff usually ended up, even though she's supposed to be a global savior, it always ended up in this particular circle, more or less.
Right.
Meanwhile, Angel was actually dealing with these more far-reaching villains in the form of Wolfram and Hart and all their demonic influences.
Right. And, you know, he had a big scope to-do list, but also he helped the, you know, person next door, or the person running from,
Yeah.
you know, a toxic ex or something, you know.
You're right. It did float between world-saving problems and street-level problems, almost like Spider-Man does during different phases.
And I found that was a good mix. That was a better mix, and less teen angst, less... Buffy had a lot of, oh no, this boy doesn't like me, and I like this boy.
A lot of self-imposed problems.
Right, and I think it's true what you said. The viewer matured, but the storyline didn't.
You know, that's up for debate. I can just say what works for me. We are going to get into the subject of the week, and that is Rat Queens Volume 2. It's also known as The Far-Reaching Tentacles of Nrygoth. It is issues 6 through 10 of the series. It is written by Curtis J. Weeb. There's a number of artists through here, including the original artist Rock Upchurch. Ed Brisson did the letters. Edits by Laura Tavishati. And Jim Valentino was a producer. The creator of Shadowhawk had a big hand in this. It was actually from his line from Image that Rat Queens comes out of, Shadowline Comics. And I need to give an update because as a result of this reading, I decided to double-check if I understood Rock Upchurch correctly, the original artist, the one that was arrested on domestic battery. It turns out he did not leave the book voluntarily. About the same time Curtis J. Weeb found out about it, he fired Upchurch. He just up and got rid of him. There's a little bit of controversy in Volume 3, the volume that comes after it, because there was a woman who was doing the art, Tess Fowler. And after about 5 issues, the series went through a soft reboot of sorts. It's not quite that, but it's a little more complicated. and Fowler was not invited to rejoin. But there was this online uproar because they complained that Curtis J. Weeb was replacing a woman on the Rat Queens, Tess Fowler, with Rock Upchurch again. A guy who was arrested on battery. And the weird thing was, it turns out Rock Upchurch never returned to the series. They just hired another artist. At the time, Fowler's contract went up, and they just decided not to renew it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it created this whole online consternation, even though it's not what happened. So I give Weeb and Image credit, man. When they found out Upchurch may have been a toxic individual, they just said, okay, you may be successful, but that's it. We're done. Right now.
Well, good.
So, yeah, I give them credit for at least being forward-looking about it. But for people that have listened to the show for a while, you know that we did Volume 1 about 10, 12 weeks ago. And it was a big hit among those of us in the room. For some reason, Casey wasn't here for that either.
Suspicious.
But I was curious to know if Volume 2 would hold up to the high bar that Volume 1 set. And it was a tremendously high bar they set. And it was kind of weird in the first page to kind of see the aftermath of the party at the end of Volume 1.
Yeah.
Violet in the afterglow with Orc Dave laying or spooning her. The dwarven woman. Betty, who looked like she'd been up talking all night with Freya.
Mm-hmm.
Hannah, who had regrettable sex, it looked like, with Sawyer, the town sheriff.
Yeah.
And I mean, the phrase when she's putting on her clothes, when she's trying to get dressed herself, put on some clothes before I whip out my fuck wand again. And I know that she's a mage, but I'm kind of scared that that's literal.
Because I think it comes up again later in the volume.
The thing is, though,
Yeah,
the way
it
this
does.
series, the way this series go, it could be figurative as well. That's what scares me.
I think with her, that would have been a literal thing. She's that kind of person.
Yeah, it doesn't really play.
Yeah, and poor Dee, the one introvert on this crew, and she wakes up alone, just kind of wistfully patting the pillow next to her, like she wished she did something, but she just couldn't work it up.
Actually, in hindsight, after reading the whole volume, that particular panel gives a different meaning to me now.
It does. But I mean, the following morning, half the kitchen is still trash and Betty's cooking, and if you know from the prior volume, that's a dangerous goddamn thing.
Yeah.
For those that may be unaware, Betty is what they call a smidgen. It's like this world's version of a halfling. She is a good thief, a credible fighter, bit of a kleptomaniac, and a hardcore drug addict.
Yeah. Hardcore's being nice.
Yeah, she's functional and everything, but yeah, she's way into very questionable things, so I have no idea how that's going to go. Freya sees Violet and Dave coming in, and she asks him, how's your head? And Violet's turn of phrase, like someone's been pounding it all night. Dave's just sitting there smiling. All right, buddy, it's early. Words no worky. Oh, I didn't say a thing. And when Hannah finally walks in fully dressed, pretending nothing happened, and they're all staring at her.
Yeah, she was ignoring it, trying to make it go away, but it didn't.
Yeah, especially Betty. We all heard you cast an invisibility spell in your room this morning. And then Violet follows up with, pretty sure it was someone screaming, fuck me bloody, Sawyer. That tipped me off. Also, for the record, I want to switch bedrooms with Dee. This series is so unapologetically just blue and gruff. These are... I like how some people said that Sex in the City was what happened when 4 women act like men. No, I think Rat Queens is what happens when 4 women act like men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when the very next panel, it's Gary who pops up out of nowhere. And from Volume 1, Gary is the guy from the guard wall who nobody likes.
Yes.
He's the one that is repeatedly told to basically just go fuck off. And when he appears and he just says behind them, look, can we debate who sexed who last night? Or, no, I'm sorry. Look, we can debate who sexed who last night, but I think we can all agree on one thing. Great fucking party. Hannah grabs a bottle of wine, breaks the bottle, points it at him and says, Gary, I will kill you. And Gary just bows his head and says, I'll see myself out. And before he can move, Dee punches him in the face and just cold cocks him. Hannah just smiles and says, nice, and all Dee can say is, I have no idea what came over me. There's just something about Gary that does this to people. I'm not entirely... What?
He's just the guy who's got that look of, I want nothing to do with you, shut up. I know of some people like that.
Yeah, there are some people that you just intrinsically don't like, and it's not because they're a bad person. There's just something about them you stare at and go, I don't like you. There's no rhyme or reason to it, you just don't like him. That's Gary. But the Rat Queens were summoned to the mayor's office right after the Gary incident, and the conversation between Hannah and Violet? What the frick?
Yeah.
I don't even know. I had to reread it a couple times.
Well, it doesn't help that it pretty much starts mid-sentence with Violet. Like they're already arguing over something. Because I wasn't that drunk to begin with, so no matter what everyone might tell you, it wasn't my fault that, and Hannah cuts in, Gods, you are such a liar! You totally had it in your hand and you kept pulling on it. I was trying to cover it because you wanted to blast it with your damn wand. If anyone should be kicked out of town, it'd still be intact if you didn't have fucking man hands. Perfect for windpipe punching you to death. And it turns out they're arguing because somebody broke the exposed penis of a statue last night. Pulled it off the statue. And I love the mayor's reaction of, I don't care who broke the penis off the gift of Palisade. Did me a favor anyway. The Concerned Mothers Decency Coalition finally shut right the hells up.
Yeah.
What? Which is, it's so straightforward for a politician. You really don't expect that to come from anybody.
Well, they have a reputation of being reprimanded time and time again, so...
Yeah, and I mean...
They feel it's like this is par for the course.
Right, and I just love that they thought this was going to be what finally caused him to throw them out, and his exact words are, quote, kick you out? Somehow the statue is what you think sent me over the edge. And again, after reading Volume 1, it's like, yeah, you think this is bad. I don't understand you. But he feels bad because the town guildmaster got half the mercenary guilds killed, or at least half their members, and the queen survived and also saved the town from an orc invasion that they sort of caused, but still, they dealt with it. So he paid them 50 gold pieces each, as well as the money he owed them for the last job. That's unusually pragmatic.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that came out in issue number 6 here, and it's something that was kind of a slow burn, was Lola. She was the town guardsman who was helping Sawyer in the early part of issue 6. The woman.
Mm-hmm.
Holy crap, this lady is a force of nature.
Yeah.
Really?
She's terrifying! And I don't mean like literally terrifying, but she has way more ability than you find out about in this issue. She seems quiet. Maybe she has jacked arms, granted, but you don't know what she's capable of until things really start. And, some of the things that are going on in here, it's like Betty questioning Hannah about the whole black eyes thing, which Hannah covers as well as she can. Mm-hmm. Dee still dealing with some emotional items that she can't quite put together on her own. And I forget, what was the job they were sent on? Oh, that's right. They were supposed to protect a caravan of supplies from mushroom men.
Yes, and that was interesting.
Yeah, not mushroom-worshipping men. Men made out of mushrooms.
Yes.
And I mean...
which Betty probably started consuming.
Yeah. I mean, it's freaky enough that these are walking fungus. They don't seem to talk or anything, but you're killing semi-sentient beings of some sort. And the queens are going about it with their aplomb, except for Betty, who's taking pieces of them and shoving them in a bag. Because, mushrooms. They may have some kind of attribute to them.
Of course she would think about that.
Yeah. And I mean, right after the fight's over, she's pretty much eating a couple pieces like they're small loaves of bread. And she looks up at the others watching her and just says, "What? Yes, it's mushrooms, but it's also mushroom people, Betty. Well, they aren't using their bits anymore." There's literally no way possible to respond.
None.
And that's what I love about Upchurch's writing. It's almost like he realizes how ridiculous what he's making is, and someone has to call out just how fantastical and odd all of this is.
Right.
But yeah, the queens get back to town. The day is won, not saved, but won. And Hannah, by herself, finds Old Lady Bernadette, one of the people who was the major causes of the last volume's hardships, just wandering the streets. And the image of what happened to Bernadette is one of the few times I've been chilled to the bone by a comic book.
Oh, wow, yeah.
That was very eerie.
Yeah, because it looks like somebody removed her eyes, but that's not what happened. Someone has placed some kind of digging worm or maggot onto her eye sockets, and these things have burrowed in.
Yeah, and it's not a clean burrow.
No, it's large, I don't want to say infected, but just wounds that are pulsing with these things, as well as several holes outside these pulsing zones as to where more of these worms have burrowed in and just kind of nested. It's
pockmarked.
Yeah, it is.
Ugh.
Yeah, I don't scare easily, but that one got me off. That caught me off guard. There is no way to really prepare for that. Even describing the image, I feel like I've really undersold how horrific it is.
Yep.
Let's just say there are some people with a particular phobia that would be terrified of this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And before Hannah in the next issue can figure out what happened, she's hit by a lightning bolt in the back, and it turns out it's Tizzy, one of the survivors of the Peaches, one of the other guilds, the ones that Braga came from.
Yeah.
Right.
And it turns out Tizzy and Hannah have a long-standing enmity of each other that is also laid bare further on in the volume.
Mm-hmm.
But Tizzy basically accused Hannah of causing whatever happened to Bernadette. And
Right,
even
just because they were at odds before.
Well, yeah, the two don't like each other because Hannah is admittedly antagonistic.
Mm-hmm.
And Bernadette didn't like Hannah nor the rest of the Rat Queens because no matter what they did, they kept breaking her shop. Usually on accident, but it still happens, and that's got to piss you off sooner or later.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, Tizzy's thrown off by Hannah putting an arm underneath Bernadette and trying to lead her somewhere, obviously to get help. Mm-hmm. The next page, though, just kind of broke up the whole emotional thing when it's Betty with this bizarre wide grin, smiling at a person made of candy on the couch next to her.
Yeah.
I liked that exchange. It was really good.
The dialogue was freaky because I couldn't tell which ones may be real world and which ones may be drug induced. Obviously, whatever mushroom men she ate is kicking in.
And we all know she has a sweet tooth.
Oh yeah, she pretty much subsists on candy and drugs. I mean, the first panel of them talking, I'm almost convinced was real world stuff because it sounded normal.
Yeah.
Right.
I
I was like, okay, who is this person that's made of candy? And wait a second, something's weird.
Yeah. I mean, the first panel is, I see you looking at me. I know what you're thinking. I want you inside me. Maybe not exactly what you're thinking. How you doing? Good. And I think from here is where it breaks down because suddenly it's, God, you smell good. The dress. Chocolate. With sprinkle sequins. And your head? Peppermint. And that's when Betty just chomps down on this thing. And then you break into the real world, and it's poor Violet with Betty munching on her hair. And Violet just grim-faced says, she's cut off.
Yeah.
That's it. No more for this one. I do like Dee, though. Well, better have her safely gnawing on you in here than a stranger out there. Like last time.
I just want to know what the last time was. It just raises so many questions.
I'm immensely curious as well. But the other thing we found out that I did kind of steamroll in the last issue was that a dark-skinned man showed up for Dee. And it turns out this dark-skinned man is somebody that's never been introduced to the Queens before, but it's Dee's husband.
Yep.
And nobody knew she was married.
Yeah, she never talked about it. She oddly would talk about the freaky cult she was in, but she never talked about being married.
She totally called it a cult.
Yeah. But that revelation kind of gives a bit more context to that first page panel of Dee in the bed alone.
Yeah. Sawyer, the town sheriff, has been captured by Garrick, the town guild keeper, who unfortunately caused a lot of pain in the last issue. He has some kind of freaky mask now that isn't explained at this point. But in addition to capturing Sawyer, basically Garrick wants to destroy the town, and the first way he does that is sending several men to kill the town sheriffs, including Lola. And it's right here in the middle of issue 7 that you find out that Lola is to be feared.
Oh.
Yep.
You know, a former town sheriff named Ven brought 7 guys with him, so it's a total of 8 people. And Lola takes them on initially barehanded. And I say initially because even though she takes her lumps and her cuts, with each one she defeats, she starts grabbing weapons from each of them and gets more dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
When she took that weighted quarterstaff and pulped a man's head with it, I already knew we were dealing with some next level crap.
Yeah.
You know,
That was intense.
Yes, and as much as I don't appreciate Rock Upchurch as a person, he really knew how to draw action. Because this stuff looked like it had weight, it had inertia, it had pain.
And lots of use of red.
Yeah, and
I end up having to do a double take on the splash page because I didn't realize I had to read it from one side of the book to the other first.
Oh. Well, I mean, it's like when, after she did that, somebody snuck up behind her with a sword, cut her shoulder, but she still had enough wherewithal and fortitude to grab the man's sword hand and break his arm over the same shoulder.
That's painful. And then properly kick the dropped sword.
Yeah, right into someone else's forehead. I was actually
Yeah.
impressed by what she did with the oversized man, though, because after that, some huge guy that looks like, I don't know, I almost want to say Earthquake from the World Wrestling Federation, pins her down by her neck, punches her in the face, and she recoiled, she felt that, but she still just immediately took her thumbs and jammed them into the man's eyes, while still dodging somebody else with an axe.
Casual as can be.
Yeah. And then she, the guy with the axe missed. He tried to step on her, and she broke his leg in a way that it looks like, I don't know, jiu-jitsu or Krav Maga, something that could happen in the real world, which made it worse, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Best visual for anyone to understand what this is. This match like this might be a bad football injury.
But the image afterwards of that springing, rolling elbow she did on that man and forced his face into the axe. What the frick?
I want her on my team in the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah, she killed 7. She killed 7 men. It looks like in about 90 seconds. And even though she's battered, she looks up at the guy who brought them, and all she can say is, "You got 7 more?"
Yeah.
And then when that man charged her, she deflected the sword with her arms, not the blade, just like the swing. Then her next 4 moves are to break each of his limbs.
Very deliberately.
Yeah. She targeted each and broke all of them before taking his hair, pulling his head back, and slamming his face into the concrete hard enough to embed it.
Yeah, there's no more face.
Yeah. I mean, in D&D terms, that's like plus 10 badass. I have no words for how awesome Lola is.
That's a good description, though.
But, the rest of the queens are doing what they can for Bernadette. They're never going to be able to heal her eyes, but they can at least stop the infection and the invasion in her face. That's almost sad. I feel bad for... I didn't like what Bernadette did to him, but that's way beyond what she deserved.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when the queens put together this whole thing is about Sawyer, not about them necessarily. This whole thing is, since Volume 1, has been about hurting Sawyer. But the unfortunate thing on top of it all is they find out Garrick has stolen some kind of high mask from Dee's religious sect. And it's a mask that can invite her bizarre octopus or squid gods into the real world.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what is happening as they're discovering it. And
Yep.
I gotta say, the images of these things coming through is super imposing, but it's weirdly broken up by Violet sitting on the couch and then Betty playing with a ball of yarn.
Yeah, like a kitten on her back, just tossing it up.
Yeah. I didn't know how to respond. And the next issue number 8, that confused me out the gate.
Yeah.
Because you have these chaos demons coming through, but what we basically see is an extended flashback as to why Violet is Violet.
Mm-hmm.
For those who are trying to catch up, Violet is a red-headed dwarf, and she is probably the most straightforward of the Rat Queens, but she's also the most driven. There's something that's been pushing her since the first issue, but we've never really had a definition of it.
And now we're getting it.
What were you going to say, Joanna?
I was Yeah, we finally get to see a little bit more. There's a little bit about her in the previous issue where her brother, I guess her twin brother,
Yes.
comes in and he's like, "Well, why did you shave your beard?" This is the kind of story behind that, where she sees this in this flashback. We see this tournament going on, and this female who has shaved her beard and says, traditions, society, I do what I want.
Yeah.
And she's just like, marry me. It's just like, this is
Yeah,
why she is.
we knew from Volume 1 when her brother Barry showed up that she came from some highfalutin family of tournament fighters in the Dwarven Kingdom. I had no idea they were well-to-do people, and I mean like affluent people.
Yeah.
You know, they own castles, they hosted the damn tournaments. Her father is responsible for a company that basically makes extremely durable but lightweight and functional and beautiful armor. And on top of their family being in charge of all this, Violet's life before she left was basically being the model or the booth babe of her family.
And she was not having any of it. She wanted to be in the tournament with her brother,
Mhm.
and her dad told her no, and just brushed her off, like, oh, I told you no, it'll still be the same answer next year, and,
Yeah, the Dwarven Kingdom is definitely, or at least her family anyways, definitely laid out as patriarchal. The men have all the say as to what happens, regardless of in what order they're birthed, and then the women are pretty much relegated to the house duties or whatever the men require them to do. It's very stereotypical in that way, even though in a meeting with their father about what Violet wants to do and what Barry's going to do doesn't go her way, Violet makes it pretty clear that in one punch she can lay out her brother.
yeah. And then her dad says, well, you asked for it, son.
Yeah.
Basically, like,
Yeah.
you got what was coming to you.
I mean, the woman that Violet met, Morgan of Clad Meldhammer, yeah, she shaved her beard. She had like a 5 o'clock shadow. She's not the most kept person in the world, but this is also one of the places we find out where the name of the Rat Queen's mini guild came from.
Yeah.
Because she explains, and I almost forgot her name again, Morgan explains that the rats on her armor are because rats are the harbingers of impending destruction. And if that doesn't describe the entirety of the Rat Queens in one sentence, I don't know what does.
Because usually where they are is chaos and destruction.
Yeah.
They're either causing it, fighting it, or it's happening because of what they're doing.
Yeah, Morgan, though, reminds me of some kind of bizarre, like, cross of Violet and Hannah, because she's very much Violet style when it comes to combat and straightforwardness, but her attitude reminds me a lot of Hannah.
Yes. Agreed.
It's like when she puts on her full armor, and she's walking away, and she yells back to her attendant, "Can we hurry this along? There's enough boob sweat to fill up a flagon in here." So, yeah, after the tournament, Morgan wins it, but Violet has to stand still while her brother wails on her with a sword while she's in armor to prove how strong it is, and the men around her are just making sex jokes about her. Like,
oh yeah, the heckling.
not even good sex jokes. They're like drunken teenage sex jokes.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, okay, that would make me snap. Like, I would snap, I would break something or their face, and then poof.
Yeah.
A foot to the face, there's a crack, and then there's blood spewing.
Yeah, and I know that Violet is on a catwalk for this demonstration, but there's something about the way that foot hit that told me that wasn't just a kick from the catwalk. That was a flying kick.
Oh, yeah.
She came in boot first, put him on the ground, and just put him out. And she didn't stick around for admonishing. She ran straight back to her room, freaked out, and just kind of thought the way Morgan did. F all this, and started to cut her beard, like, very savagely with scissors.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of reminded me of Britney Spears' breakdown. Not that I was ever a fan, but the whole, shaving of the head, having a moment.
Yeah, I can agree with that. But at least her mother was kind enough to come in and just shave her. Not question her, not belittle her, just pretty much made it clear that her mother is in her corner.
Right,
Her
and that was
awesome.
sweet.
Yeah.
Her mother's awesome. Dad's bit dense and her brother's a fucking jerk.
Yeah, but this is where it all ties in. You're probably wondering why all this is happening in this issue, because at the end of this flashback, Violet's checking her new face in the mirror when the whole thing turns black, and you have this demonic version of Hannah staring at her, which reaches out, grabs her, and yanks her through the looking glass. And then we're back in the real world. It turns out the Chaos Demons that are summoned have some kind of weird mental ability where they basically render a person comatose and start shoving them within their own memories.
Yeah, they never really explained that. Is it psionics? Is it just mind control? Is it actually feeding off of brain matter?
You know,
Honestly, the method I don't think is important. Is this? I think they're shoving these characters into very significant moments of their lives and feeding off, I guess, the emotional energy from that.
yeah, I think the memories are more important than the gimmick because as much as we would like to sit here and explain it, we do have to admit that these are technically god-level beings. They're not going to be very easily defined no matter what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a family reunion of Cthulhu and his 50 cousins or however many there were.
Yeah. This was the last issue that Rock Upchurch handled, and again, as much as I don't appreciate the man, unfortunately I have to like his art. But unlike the issues I have with Ethan Siver, DC never fired him. So since Curtis Weeb and Image fired him, I can actually look at this art and appreciate it for what it is, with knowledge that the company took care of getting rid of a bad individual.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So I can read the art without actually saying I appreciate the guy. However, as of issue 8 is when Stefan Sejic took over. He's the guy who's doing Justice League Odyssey these days, and oh my god, is his art such a big upshift for this series. The fact that Image did not keep him for this series almost infuriates me. His art style is almost stereotypically non-comic book. It's like every panel is a digital painting. And they just happen to put, like, comic book lines over the top of it. That'd be the easiest way to describe it. And I like his art. It's very smooth. What? Does anybody else have an opinion? Because it was a big change.
I liked it though.
I didn't actually notice it.
Really? Because I like the work. It's a very different style of art. He has Rock Upchurch had a very strong style, very bold style, but Sejic's is more nuanced. You know, the women actually looked more like women, in my opinion, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this early flashback in issue 9 of Hannah and her mother dealing with the stuff they had to deal with in the Elven towns. I felt bad for the both of them.
Oh.
Yeah, that was really sad.
Yeah, you get the feeling from their conversation that Hannah doesn't like anybody because she's being victimized and bullied, but it's still not very well defined as to why, other than it has something to do with her father. Although I'm positive that the way this flashback ended with her mother being impaled is not the way it goes, because remember, way back in issue 1, she got that mystical rock call from her mother.
Right,
Yeah,
I was
don't
wondering
think
about that.
I think it's a stepmother.
Oh, you think so?
I believe it's a stepmother.
Because they were talking about striking out on their own since the town wouldn't deal with them anymore.
Yeah, because her mother, before getting impaled and barely decapitated,
Mm-hmm.
she said, just me and your father. And obviously, I think she took refuge with her father after this, and I'm assuming he didn't want to be alone, so I guess he's remarried.
I don't know about that. The two of them in art, anyway, do look a lot like each other.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm pretty sure this one right here that we saw eat it.
So you mean her stepmother called?
Yeah, her stepmother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was her stepmother who called.
All right. Yeah, Hannah is forced to wake up from her own dream, or her own mindscape, which is probably more self-imposed since she's a necromancer. But when she wakes up, she sits up from a crumbled wall, and the words come from underneath her, "Would you please move?" And she's sitting on top of bricks, which are on top of a small man, like another smidgen. And it almost seems cruel that she looks down and says, "You've got a magnificent view, not sure what you're complaining about." "Yes, indeed, and I mean no offense when I say, I think you broke all my ribs." And your wall. Disappointing. It was my favorite. I need this in a TV show, for crying out loud.
Yes.
And that's the worst part about all this, is the further I read into the comic book, the more easily it is to see this visually as some kind of live entertainment. I don't know about movie or TV show. I would pray for a stream show of some sort so I don't have to deal with, TV ratings and restrictions. But, oh dear God, this is fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then Hannah goes out to try and confront one of these demon squids, and the world shifts again on her to where she is flashing back to a sex scene between herself and Sawyer, and that's kind of jarring for a comic book to suddenly look at nude people on a tiger skin.
That was an interesting shift.
Yeah. Let alone the mental image when Hannah is shifting in and that little circle next to the last one before she's fully in the memory of a spike being driven in.
Yeah.
You know what? That's a pretty stark metaphor.
Yep.
You know, and let alone she realizes at this point that she's being forced into her memories, and unfortunately she's having trouble focusing because she's remembering a very large penis inside her at this moment, so she can't cast the spell she needs.
She's a little distracted.
Yeah, very. And unfortunately, the Sawyer in her memories has no idea that he's a memory. So it's something beyond memory work, obviously, if she's able, or if things are being rewritten in such a way. Otherwise, it would just play like a record, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But this is also the moment where she woke up Vi. So this is where issues 8 and 9 kind of collide, and we find out why Violet just lived through that very strange experience. And the Rat Queens are slowly assembling one by one until finally Lola shows up with a quarterstaff and Braga in her purple armor. Braga is an orc from the first volume. She's an albino orc, and it turns out she's a transsexual albino orc.
We won't know about that till later.
Yeah, the one-shot was good. I mean, it was cool to read. I really had no clue that she was trans anything.
I didn't either.
Doesn't affect my opinion of the character, though. She is pain personified.
Oh, yeah. Total badass.
Yeah, I especially like when Violet takes a quick head count, and I'm starting to think that Violet is their de facto leader, not because they called her that, but because she's the one that's thinking in broader terms than the others. She figures out that Betty's missing, and that's when Braga says, "I blacked out when I tried to take one of those monsters down. Came to with a splitting headache and a Betty in my backpack." And that's when a hand shoves itself out and says, "I found the exit, friends!" Which I'm pretty sure she believes is a dungeon.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure she's still tripping at that point.
I don't know if she's tripping or in her own memory, but either way, she's definitely not on the same plane as the rest.
Yeah.
I don't know. Tripping balls while going down through memory lane might be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, finding out Sawyer was a member of the Assassin Clan from the first volume was actually a bit of a surprise for me. You wouldn't think a guy that stand-up would have a history that bleak.
Mm-hmm.
And we get one more flashback.
Yeah, Orc Dave. Orc Dave is another orc, another albino orc, but we've seen him before with his bluebirds of healing that seem to be nesting in his beard. We find out in this flashback that his birds may have a number of different properties to them, and they're not nice.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean...
It all depends on his state of mind.
Yeah, and Dave's not a classical mage of any sort. He's a druid, for sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You know, his powers are definitely all about nature. And when he woke up as his usual self, that's almost when I wish there was another series just about Orc Dave, because that seems like a story and a half right now.
Right?
God. And while they're picking him up, Violet has one arm around him, and she says, "An abandoned wizard tower to fight Garrig Lake, who wields the power of D's god by the Haruspex Requiem and is controlling the giant reality-devouring demons as a means of smashing Palisade to rubble." That's when Dave just kind of starts running forward in the same direction as everybody else, and all he can say is, "This town is weird."
Understatement of the century.
Really?
Yeah!
But the next panel, though, the next page to me was great, because it's two guys who are waiting for whatever response is coming, and even he says, "This town is weird." It's not always with the sky squid and end times, I promise you. Yeah, I think that's them coming up the road. Definitely more than Garrick promised, and that's when you realize that there's a lot of them coming down the road.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Rat Queens, the four Daves, four guys named Dave. Let me see, a couple of odds and ends. Oh, and Lola. And a couple other guys I'm sure they're not familiar with. And that's when the guy in charge just says the Rat Queens and the four Daves and Lola and Braga? Bilford, Bogan, we're going to need an army. And the other guy gestures behind. What the hell are you on about? We are an army. Oh, Brad. Brad. You are so fucking dumb.
You just want to pat him on the head and give him a cookie and send him in the corner to think about what he said.
Again, I need this as a TV show. Whatever.
Yes,
Curtis
really.
Weeb is definitely. He has this weird way of bringing this whole thing to life. And it's almost like the series is a spoof of itself. Just about the time you're convinced, okay, this is high fantasy adventure, somebody comes up with a line that just yanks you around by the nose until you realize, wait, he's making fun of himself again.
Yeah. it breaks the fourth wall a lot in that
like
manner.
Like a casual fun group of D&D players just had fun.
But I was almost as surprised by the idea that these two guys down front, who already know they're screwed, they weren't blasted apart by Hannah. They weren't rended limb from limb by Violet. They weren't even stabbed by Dee with her giant shield. No, Betty, the sweet little smidgen, ran forward, cut their ankles out from under them, and then jumped up on the other one and probably stabbed him somewhere in the facial region.
Yes.
You know, dear God, each and every person here is dangerous, and they don't... That's the other fun thing about the way Weeb is writing this series. You never really seem to understand what the full arsenal of any particular character is. It seems like every time you understand them, there's a new level found, and I don't mean their hair turns blonde and they start throwing around higher energy. They just have some new trick or some new aspect of their personality you just didn't know about until the moment.
Right, it's always a wild card, and that keeps it fresh. It keeps it interesting.
Well, I mean, we've seen a lot of what Hannah can do in the prior volume, but her literal wave of icicles? That's some terrifying...
What was that?
I don't know. You know,
That's...
Orc Dave conjuring the ravens that are attacking people's faces? There's all kinds of stuff here that just seems next level.
Mm-hmm.
And issue number, 10, the last issue in this particular volume, when it starts out with another flashback that actually explains that Tizzy from the Peaches and Hannah have a history from mage school. As much as you can sense they have a personal enmity, I didn't think it ran that deep.
Sounds like a weird friendship rivalry.
Well, it's not really a friendship because the two of them apparently tried to be friends in mage school, but knowing Hannah as being Hannah, she probably screwed it up. Because Tizzy does seem like somebody fiercely loyal.
Now, before we continue on, I'd like to point out the cover art for this particular issue was fucking awesome.
The Star Wars cover?
Yeah.
Yes.
With Violet in the Luke Skywalker role and slave Orc Dave.
Yes.
I need this as a print.
I'm pretty sure you can find it somewhere.
I'm going to make that happen.
This also seems like it needs to be a prequel, though. The story of whatever happened between Tizzy and Hannah way back when. Because Hannah definitely stuck out at mage school, where everyone is in an elf... It's an elf school. Everyone's in these bright-colored robes and outfits. And then there's Hannah in what could best be described as smoking in the girls' room goth.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, she's the goth at the prep school. She's not going to fit in.
Yeah. It was an interesting moment, but you find out that this is Tizzy's flashback. She is just waking up much later than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And
apparently this memory left an impression.
Yeah. But there's Hannah conjuring demon hands, grabbing two people, hoisting them in the air, and I love the one guy who says, "I don't suppose these are helping hands?" Sorta! And she squeezes them to death.
Yeah, sorta.
Yeah. And it turns out Tizzy, even though she hasn't had much of a spotlight in the prior volume or this one, she may be about as powerful as Hannah is, just in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, Hannah's a bit more aggro than Tizzy is.
Well, Hannah's also dealing in necromancy, which is generally frowned upon by elves. You know, Tizzy's power set may be a little more...
Elemental?
I don't know about elemental. I was going to say typical of elves.
I guess, yeah.
You know, she deals more in the lives and controlling the elements, whereas Hannah deals with, you know, all kinds of mystical buggery for the most part.
Which honestly sounds more fun.
Yeah, probably. But the two of them holding a little bit of a quip off there after Tizzy saves Hannah from an arrow, and it just occurred to me that in the background, Violet is vaulting off Orc Dave to stab a poor shield bearer in the back of the skull with her sword.
I ship them so much.
Do you mean Dave or Tizzy and Hannah?
Dave.
Oh, okay.
Dave and Violet.
I mean,
Yeah, Dave and Violet.
it's like everybody gets their little moments to shine. That next page when a mage for the army is getting ready to cast, and then Braga pops up behind him, hits him with an axe so hard it goes through the back of his neck, through the front, and cuts off his casting hand.
Yeah, that was a little overkill.
Overkill nothing, and she even finished it off with one of the best quips I've ever heard. Books on a battlefield. Fucking rodent mages.
Overkill.
Yeah.
I think Braga is nothing but overkill.
That
Yeah.
might be her middle name.
If the Red Kings don't cover overkill, Braga does.
Are you kidding? I still remember her line from the first volume. Orcs only know one language. Pain. And I'm the fucking alphabet.
Classic.
And it, was it Hannah's like? She compliments both Braga and Tizzy and says, "You'd make a nice addition to the Queens." And Tizzy just looks at Braga and says, "Oh, she's definitely talking to you."
I think they would both make excellent additions.
Probably. I can say in later volumes that Braga is the only one that shows up as a queen. She joins as of the beginning of volume 4.
Yeah,
Spoilers.
Well, it's been out. That's 10 issues past where the current comics are.
Okay, well, I'm not there yet. It's still a spoiler.
You know, whatever happened to Tizzy and Lola as a result of this soft reboot, I'm not entirely certain. I'm still working through those volumes myself.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we find out in this issue that things are truly buggered. I mean, even as the Queens are reassembling, 2 of the 4 days have apparently passed.
Oh.
And
That's sad.
yeah, and what was it? Hannah, Violet, and Dee are working their way up the tower. Betty, goodness knows what she's doing. Probably
hiding behind a tower shield.
or stabbing and eating something. But that one flashback where they encounter the demigod's powers one more time, and that's where you find out that Hannah has revealed her big secret to Sawyer after their lovemaking session.
Yeah, that's why that memory was important to.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's got to be a painful memory when you're afraid that the person you care about the most just won't accept you for who you are.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Hannah is one of those characters that will never admit she cares for somebody, but it's written all over her face, and she has to care for Sawyer in some way to reveal such a big secret. And for those that don't know, Hannah as an elf usually has 2 very strong buns wrapped up on her head above her ears. And it turns out when she uncoils that hair, she's revealing broken horns. So she's not just elf, she is part demon of some sort.
Yeah.
And she hides it under her hair to deal with the world. But she revealed it to Sawyer, who didn't turn her away, but it was just a really big reveal all at once that he was not prepared for.
It was definitely a shock. It was like...
Yeah. I mean, as much as I would like to sit there and say I wouldn't respond like that, the more I think about somebody doing that to me after such an intimate moment and then revealing to me that their heritage is nowhere near what I thought it was, I probably wouldn't know how to respond in that second either.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he could have said something. I mean, yes, he was shocked, but she took it as revulsion.
Yeah.
And that hurt like 8 times worse.
No, I understand where they're both coming from, but I just really understand why he didn't say anything. That's a lot.
Yeah. He's
that's fair.
He's trying to not say the wrong thing, and he is this in a loop of what do I say?
Yeah, because Hannah is not the type of person that you can respond to something like that with "I love you anyway," because she wouldn't believe you. She's that cynical. But you also just can't stay there and say, "The fuck is that?" because you'll definitely end up with a wand jammed up an orifice.
And then you die.
Yes.
Slowly.
You know, and she did feel rejected, and I understand that, but that's not what she was. He just had no idea how to respond in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And Hannah was just kind of wrapped up in that memory. She can come out of that. The whole thing came down to Dee at the end. She managed to stab Garrick in the back while he was lost in his own memory, and that's what all this was about in the end. He didn't want to destroy the world. He wanted these gods to lock him in his memory of getting married.
That was tragic in itself.
It was, but it's a far way to go to get trapped in that memory.
I think there might be some kind of corruption thanks to the helmet.
Maybe, I was going to say he kind of took the Thanos route. Like, his end goal was something that made sense, but his method of doing it was insane.
Yeah. Dee took the mask he was wearing and used it to lock Nagarath and his kin back in their home dimension. And she was able to remove the mask without damage, which, you know, is a big moment. I know I didn't explain it there, but this mask apparently bonds to people that uses it. To which her husband does pretty much explain that, yeah, this is a big moment because whoever dons this mask is their high priest or priestess.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to say that's huge for Dee because it involves her getting intensely involved with a religious sect she's trying to leave in the rear view.
Right. And I was going to say, if you notice when she took the mask off of the body, his face was no longer there. The skin, he looked like Red Skull. It was just bone and blood. But
when Dee didn't clean out the mask, so when she took it off and there was nothing underneath, that implies that the mask somehow absorbed the person, or it bonds very deeply given enough time.
Well, yeah, I think that it's supposed to take all the memories of the previous wielder and just add it to the collection.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but D refusing to go back to their religious sect with her husband was big, but also the proclamation that yes, now she understands that her religion is no longer bullshit, but that doesn't mean she buys into it. Now it means she's going to protect the world from it.
Yeah, that
So,
was interesting.
yeah, D
That
yeah, D has reserves of strength that she just doesn't really show.
she's an awesome character, and the fact that she literally saw their god, um, she's like, okay, it's real, it's terrifying.
Hmm.
I'm not going to let anyone else die because, they saw these extra dimensional creatures come through and wreak havoc and kill. And she's like, nope, never again.
Yeah,
Not on my watch.
yeah, because if this is what if this is what her sect is working towards as an end goal, it's not worth it.
Yep.
At the same time, though, to find out that there's only one survivor of the town watch, Gary,
Yes. Yes.
Had to be him.
who used his powers of annoyance to run around in front of the archers so that they would shoot at him instead of other more important people.
Wow.
That's almost noble.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to know what was going through his mind, what logic or lack thereof happened.
You know, it's possible that he did that. It's also possible that he's telling stories to make himself sound more important because this would be, you don't see him as a guy that would necessarily risk himself, but I think everybody's so glad to see that other people survive. They're just not willing to question it at this point.
Yeah, no one wants
Hmm.
to punch him in the face.
Yeah. But, the end of the volume is also very heartwarming but confusing because it looks like Hannah and Sawyer are ready to actually try a relationship, like a full-on relationship, when Hannah gets another mystical rock call, and it's apparently something about her father.
Hmm.
And she looks absolutely terrified.
Well, now that we've seen the horns, why shouldn't we be?
Yes.
Just like that's actually the unspoken thing that kind of bonds all of the Rat Queens at the end of this volume. We don't know what Betty's background is, but it seems pretty apparent that every one of them is trying to leave a former life behind, and the current one is what they've chosen for themselves.
Right. There's definitely something that they're running from.
Hmm. Whether it be familial obligations or just some kind of unspoken horror, they're all coming away from something and trying to live a new life.
Hmm.
And in Hannah's case, family is definitely not something she wants to deal with. So I'd like to know more, but that's for another volume. So we have gone through these 5 issues in more detail than I intended. Uh, all right, Joanna, you go first. No, actually, I will go first because I have a feeling I'll be the longest, but I'll be the least, I don't know, bleh about it.
Okay.
As far as follow-ups to a very interesting first volume, this actually went beyond my expectations because a second story arc could easily fall flat. A lot of stories and a lot of creators often don't know where to go in their sophomore volumes and sessions. And in this case, Weeb just seemed to keep upping the ante through the end. The art is still strong, even though Upchurch is not my favorite person, and God Sejic was a great person to fill in the last few issues here. I like these characters from top to bottom. They are all very flawed, very broken individuals, but they're also very fun and very cavalier.
Hmm.
And I don't know. I'd almost say the only thing missing from this volume is more Betty, but she was very heavily featured in the first one, and somebody else had to take a prime role.
Right. And I
And
like that they got that shift.
yeah, actually, other than Betty, each character in this volume, each of the main characters, including Braga, Tizzy, and Lola, each had their moments to shine in the most brutal of fashions.
Hmm.
Um, I know I gave the last one a 9, but this is my 10.
Really?
This volume was really good. It was an incredible follow up that made the story more grand, not less. So, Jesse, you're up.
Well, I'm always a sucker for understanding backstory and the tragedy of it. I'm a big sucker for that, and it shows in some of my older writing
Hmm.
in the worst ways. In the worst ways a fanfic can be.
I have not read your Superman, Batman / fiction. I'll get around to that.
Oh, I haven't touched that. I have not touched that. Anyways, I again, there's nothing more I can say that I haven't said before from the first volume. These characters are awesome to watch and listen to, and just banter back and forth. And with this volume we got to see a bit of the motivations for most of them.
Hmm.
Is I love it, and I feel very very much feel for a lot of them who had those really terrible experiences in trust and whatnot. Violet, especially, just not being taken seriously, and Hannah's this.
She's responding to the world with her pain, I think is the way to put it.
Yes. And I'm glad they gave us some more backstory for some of the other secondary characters too, because they were interesting characters to begin with. So I was like, "That's hell yeah."
Hmm.
I don't recall what I gave the first volume
Okay.
off the top of my head. I believe it was either 8 or a 9. I'm pretty sure it was a 9.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think I have to give this one a 10 as well.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
Wow. All right, Joanna. I left it to you because you are our lone female, and boy, did you gush over Volume 1.
I did. And I am going to get all of these in hardback, the trades and everything. I'm going to be.
I gotta
can't
send you a
wait.
picture.
Yeah, I actually just caught up to Volume 5 about 2 weeks ago, so I have it all sitting there. I just haven't had a chance to read it.
Nice. They have I don't know what you call them. They're hardbound ones. I think
The trades.
Volume 1 and 2.
Trade.
Yeah, the trades. Okay. Yeah, they're on my Amazon wish list. They may be my Christmas present to me. This, I love the background.
Mhm.
I love the character development. I like the focus. I liked seeing their pain. I mean, not in a mean way, but things like that shape, who a person is.
The
You know, the-
exploration.
Right.
Right. Their traumas, they're all badass and they're all attitude but behind that facade is just a lot of pain,
Hmm.
and it's very raw and it's very real and it's relatable, because who hasn't revealed something to a lover just to be rejected or, been hurt when they're vulnerable.
Right.
And that just spoke volumes. It seemed at first I read through it twice. The first read through, it seemed a little scattered, a little disjointed, but looking at it as a whole, it just brought everything together as to what makes the Rat Queens themselves,
Hmm.
and what makes it work so well as a group. And of course, you care about the side characters, you care about the background characters, that random guard, people from other guilds, and you start to care.
Hmm.
Even Gary?
Even Gary, because we remembered his name. They're like, "Hey, Gary survived." You care, and that's just something that isn't easy to do. Writing, the balance of gritty and dark and, well, bloody sometimes with the comedy. It's such a great combination. It's such a great presentation, and it really, 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 really makes me miss D&D a lot. No surprise here. I'm going to give it a 10
Okay.
across the board. Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I remember you gave it a 10.
Yeah, that's your
If I
prerogative.
could rank it higher, I would have ranked it higher. But it's not even that it's about all women. It's that it has such a great composition. The art, the writing, the humor, the quips, the drawings, everything just comes together.
Yeah,
and creates such a great story.
and that's a big thing that should be mentioned, though, is that although this series stars women, it's not a series that evokes like extreme feminism or just women power in general. These are just 4 cavaliers who happen to be women.
Right. And it doesn't come across as, yeah, men are horrible, women rock,
No, because they have
This is-
an equal amount of men there who is just as capable.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's very entertaining, And because I was telling somebody about this, and I was like, oh yeah, it's this group of women. It's like somebody got together and played D&D, and they're like, yeah, yeah. Of course, you would only read something about women. I'm like, no, look,
No.
I've got comic books. I mean, they know me, but it appeals to me for other reasons. You know, the fantasy, the LARP, the humor, the quips back and forth.
No,
You know, it's just so much more than that.
no, I do think that this is the worst kept secret in comic books, this series, and I say that only because it astonishes me still how few people seem to have ever even heard of it, and this is just one of those few series that doesn't require any background lore and decades of continuity or even a knowledge as to what's going on in Image Comics to understand. It's just an adventure.
Hmm.
Honestly, I repeat from last time we talked about this. My first encounter of the Rat Queens was listening to Talos and Jaffe talk about the Rat Queens with one of the other stars. I think Liam O'Brien, and I kind of dismissed it because I can't. Well, I dismissed it only for personal reasons. I thought both of them kind of are out of my circle of what I enjoy,
Hmm.
and I'm glad I'm sorely wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it almost seems like a strange way to button it up, but one of those weird turns of phrase in this series that kind of sums up the whole thing in just a few sentences is the flashback when they're introducing each other. Tizuria Airy, though I prefer Tizzy. Hannah Vizari, though I prefer Snuggle Tits.
And she's like, that's a great name. Yeah, I just came up with it.
But yeah, it's been fun. All right, I think that's enough gushing.
Okay.
All right, let me see. What have we got for next week? I still have I still have Supergirl being super, X-Men Red Volume 1, or the first volume of the Scott Pilgrim series in color. I found a color version.
I'm leaning for X-Men Red.
Okay. Jesse, any opinions?
Oh, I'll be honest. I undecided with either of these choices.
All right.
If, honestly, I think what I said last week, you'd probably shoot for Supergirl.
Okay. Wow, that leaves it up to me as the odd man out here. Let's do X-Men Red for now, only because I have a feeling between the three that would be the quickest read, and I'm still kind of concerned that I could be evacuated if things go badly here.
All right, convenience. We can work with that.
Yeah, got to
That's
consider
fair.
that a bit. So, yeah, next week we'll do X-Men Red Volume 1. And then the week after that, that'll be just post-Thanksgiving. Do we want to do a show the Monday after Thanksgiving, or do we want to give it a small break and come back? Because I don't
I
know.
can still do it.
I mean, I
not
could. I
going
just
out
don't know
of
what
town.
plans anybody has.
Yeah,
No, I'm
I don't
staying here
really-
for the holidays.
Yeah, and Thanksgiving's kind of a one-night thing, so it's like, yeah, eat with the family and go back to my life.
All right. So how about this? Next week we'll do X-Men Red Volume 1. Then we will convene the following week and we'll do Supergirl being super. How about that?
Sure.
That works.
All right. So next week, X-Men Red Volume 1, The Hate Machine. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I don't know what else to say about what's happened over the last 24 hours except Excelsior forever. Thank you very much. Have a great one. I am Jeremy.
I'm Joanna.
And Jesse.
Take care, everybody.